In 1922, Carl Jung built a stone tower with no electricity and disappeared into it for weeks, because he decided that was the only way to produce work that mattered. Welcome to Whispering Pages. If you're here just for the summary, skip to the next chapter. For the rest of us, let's ease in. Let the sounds of the room settle and just let them be. Your brain right now, in these minutes before sleep, is unusually receptive. What you hear consolidates overnight. Tonight's book is Deep Work by Cal Newport, published in 2016, a case that focus without distraction is the most valuable and most endangered skill in the modern economy. So let's begin. Get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's whisper through this one together. Cal Newport is a computer science professor at Georgetown University, a world where emails pile up and meetings multiply and the pressure to stay connected is constant. But Newport made a choice early in his career that most of his colleagues found puzzling. He stayed off social media entirely. He didn't tweet. He didn't post. He barely checked email. And yet, by his early 30s, he had published multiple books, earned tenure at a top research university, and built a reputation as one of the most productive thinkers in his field. Deep Work is his attempt to explain why. To make the case that the ability to concentrate deeply, to work for long, uninterrupted stretches on things that genuinely matter, is not just a nice quality to have. It's the core skill of our time. And we're all, quietly, losing it. Newport opens the book with Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist. In the 1920s, he was one of the most influential psychiatrists in the world, navigating a bitter and very public split from Sigmund Freud. The pressure to publish, to lecture, to defend his ideas was immense. But instead of grinding harder in his Zurich office, he built a stone tower in a village on the shores of Lake Zurich, a retreat with no electricity, where he would disappear for weeks at a time. He would wake early, write for 2 uninterrupted hours, then spend his afternoons walking and thinking in the surrounding countryside. Most people assumed the tower was a vacation. Newport argues it was the opposite. It was where Jung's most important work happened. The deep ideas that would cement his legacy emerged not from the busy life in Zurich, but from the quiet of Bollingen. Newport defines the thing Jung was doing with sharp precision. Deep work is professional activity performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their limit. It creates new value. It improves your skill. And it is hard to replicate. Shallow work, by contrast, is the logistical, non-cognitively demanding stuff. The emails, the quick meetings, the status updates, that fills most of our days without moving the needle. Here's the problem. The modern economy has made deep work harder than ever to do, and simultaneously more valuable than ever to possess. And most of us, Newport says, are sleepwalking in the wrong direction. He opens his argument in part 1 by making 3 connected claims. The first is that deep work is valuable. The second is that it's rare. And the third, perhaps the most surprising, is that it's meaningful. On value, Newport draws on the work of MIT economists who studied what kinds of workers would thrive in the age of intelligent machines. Their conclusion was that 2 groups would pull ahead: high-skilled workers who can use complex technology to generate results machines can't produce alone, and superstars, the best in their field, who, thanks to communications technology, can now serve markets of unlimited scale. The thread connecting both? They require the ability to learn hard things quickly and produce at an elite level. Both require deep work. Newport distills this into two core abilities that define the new economy's winners: the ability to rapidly master hard things, and the ability to produce at an elite level in both quality and speed. You cannot pick up complex skills in a scattered, fragmented state. You cannot produce your best work while toggling between email and the task at hand. Deep work is not just one approach to excellence, it is the mechanism by which excellence becomes possible. The second claim Newport makes in part 1 is that deep work is rare. And this is where the book becomes a little unsettling. You'd think that if deep work is so valuable, organizations would be doing everything they can to protect it. The opposite is true. The last decade has produced a wave of workplace trends that systematically destroy the conditions for deep focus. Open-plan offices, designed to encourage serendipitous collaboration, fill the day with ambient distraction. Instant messaging tools demand real-time presence. Social media use is encouraged as a form of brand building and networking. And there's a powerful cultural norm that Newport calls the metric black hole. Because the value of deep work is hard to measure directly, organizations default to visible business as a proxy for productivity. If you're responding quickly to emails, you look productive. If you're sitting quietly working through a hard problem, you look like you might be taking a nap. Newport introduces a concept he calls the principle of least resistance. In a workplace where the true value of different activities is unclear, people tend toward behaviors that are easiest in the moment. And what's easiest in the modern office is to stay connected, respond immediately, attend every meeting, and never go fully offline. This creates a culture where shallow work proliferates not because it's valuable, but because it generates the least friction. The third claim is perhaps the most philosophically rich, that deep work is meaningful. Newport makes this case from 3 different angles. The first is neurological. He draws on the work of a science writer who, after being diagnosed with a serious illness, made a deliberate decision to focus her attention on positive and engaging activities. Her conclusion, after years of study: our brains construct our experience of reality based largely on what we choose to focus on. A mind that spends its days in shallow fragmentation, skimming news, scanning feeds, half attending to meetings, builds a life that feels shallow and fragmented. A mind that regularly loses itself in deep, absorbing work builds something richer. The work becomes the life. The second angle is psychological, drawing on the research of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who spent decades studying what makes human beings most engaged and most satisfied. His concept of flow describes a state of optimal experience, full immersion in a task that perfectly matches your skill level. And his finding was counterintuitive. People report their highest levels of satisfaction not during leisure, but during work. Specifically, during the kind of deep, challenging, focused work that demands everything they have. The third angle is philosophical. Newport points to the tradition of craftsmanship, the blacksmith, the carpenter, the glassblower, and asks why skilled craftspeople seem to find such deep meaning in their work. The answer isn't that the product is meaningful in itself, but that applying skill to a difficult task over time creates its own sense of purpose. A software engineer writing elegant, challenging code, a writer wrestling language into something alive, a teacher constructing a curriculum from scratch, all of them are doing the same thing the craftsman does. The difference is that most knowledge workers have been convinced that this kind of depth is optional, or inefficient, or even antisocial in an always connected world. Newport's argument is that it's neither. It's the source of a life well lived. Part 2 of the book is called The Rules, and it's where Newport moves from argument to instruction. There are 4 rules, and each one is more practical and specific than the last. Rule 1: work deeply. Newport begins here by confronting an uncomfortable truth. You cannot simply decide to focus more and expect it to work. The research on willpower is clear. It's a finite resource that depletes over the course of a day. Every temptation you resist, every distraction you choose not to follow, draws from the same limited reservoir. By the afternoon, that reservoir is nearly empty. If you're trying to summon deep focus through sheer determination, you will fail most of the time. The solution, Newport argues, is to remove the decision entirely. You build routines and rituals that make deep work happen automatically, without requiring a fresh act of will each time. The key is choosing a philosophy, a structure that matches your life and your work. He describes 4 approaches. The monastic philosophy involves radically eliminating all shallow obligations to protect maximum deep time. Donald Knuth, the legendary computer scientist, famously gave up email entirely. His address on his website is a postal mailing address, checked a few times a year. This works when your entire professional value comes from single-minded intellectual output. The bimodal philosophy divides time into long stretches of deep work and everything else. Carl Jung's Bollingen Tower is the model, extended retreats of depth, followed by a return to normal engaged life. The rhythmic philosophy is the most practical for most people. You pick a recurring time, every morning from 6 to 8, every day from 2 to 5, and protect it absolutely, without debate or negotiation. Brian Chappell, a doctoral student and father of young children, completed his dissertation by writing from 5 to 7:30 every morning before his family woke up. Not glamorous. But it worked, because it removed the daily decision of whether to go deep. Alongside the right philosophy, Newport emphasizes rituals. Where will you work, and for how long? How will you begin? With a cup of tea, a review of your notes from the last session. What will you do when you feel the urge to check your phone? These rituals create a runway. They signal to your brain that the time for distraction is over. He also introduces the concept of the grand gesture, making a dramatic investment in your commitment to go deep. J.K. Rowling, struggling to finish the final Harry Potter novel, checked herself into a luxury hotel suite rather than work from home. Bill Gates took 2 annual Think Weeks, retreating to a lake house with nothing but books and ideas. These gestures work not just logistically, but psychologically. The investment itself signals that what you are doing is serious. Newport also makes a case for something he calls the shutdown ritual, a deliberate, structured end to the workday. Each evening, he reviews his task lists and calendar, confirms that nothing requires immediate attention, and says out loud, "Shutdown complete." The ritual sounds strange, but its purpose is real. It allows the unconscious mind to let go of open loops. Research on what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect shows that uncompleted tasks occupy mental space until they are either finished or explicitly deferred. The shutdown ritual is the deferral. It gives your brain permission to rest. Rule 2: Embrace boredom. This is the rule most people don't expect. Newport's argument here is not just that you should practice focusing more, it's that you need to stop practicing distraction. And these are different problems. Most people assume that focus is like flossing, a good habit they know how to do but keep neglecting. Newport says this misses something crucial. Research by Stanford professor Clifford Nass showed that chronic multitaskers don't just struggle to focus during multitasking. They struggle to focus even when they try not to. The brain, wired by constant distraction, starts treating the absence of novelty as a problem to be solved. It craves the ping, the scroll, the tap switch, even when you're asking it to sit still. The solution is to practice tolerating boredom deliberately. Newport's most counterintuitive suggestion: instead of scheduling occasional breaks from distraction, schedule occasional breaks from focus. Block out specific times when you're allowed to use the internet. Outside those times, resist it entirely, not because you don't need it, but to train the part of your brain that wants to escape every time thinking gets hard. Another strategy Newport calls productive meditation: taking a period when your body is occupied but your mind is free, a walk, a commute, a shower, and using it to work on a single well-defined problem. Not to let your mind wander, but to direct it. To hold the problem in your head, resist the urge to think about anything easier, and push toward an insight. This is difficult at first. It gets easier with practice. Rule 3: quit social media. Or more precisely, stop using it by default. Newport isn't calling for a total internet sabbatical. He's calling for a more honest reckoning with how we choose our tools. He describes what he calls the any-benefit mindset, the assumption that as long as a tool provides some benefit, you should use it. This sounds reasonable until you apply it consistently. A blacksmith wouldn't buy every tool with some conceivable use. The cost in time, money, and attention would destroy the business. Newport argues we need the same calculation for digital tools. His suggestion is the craftsman approach to tool selection. Identify the small number of activities most important to your professional and personal success, then only adopt a tool if its benefits to those activities substantially outweigh its negatives. By this standard, most social media platforms fail for most people. The entertainment and connection they provide are real but minor. The costs, fragmented attention, the compulsive checking habit, the subtle rewiring of what your mind considers a normal level of stimulation, are real and significant. Rule 4: drain the shallows. Newport draws on an experiment by the software company 37 Signals, now called Basecamp, who tried reducing their work week from 5 days to 4. Their finding: almost nothing important was lost. The shallow work, the meetings, the check-ins, the email threads, compressed into the available time. The deep work continued, and in some ways improved, because people had stopped pretending that filling 8 hours with activity was the same as producing 8 hours of value. Newport offers practical tools for applying this. Schedule every minute of your day, not to be rigid, but to be intentional. Most people drift through their days, responding to whatever arrives. Scheduling forces the question: is this actually worth my time right now? When new work arrives, he suggests asking, how long would it take to train a reasonably intelligent person to do this task? If the answer is short, it's shallow. If it requires weeks of learning to do well, it's deep. He also introduces fixed schedule productivity, deciding in advance when your workday ends and refusing to let it go beyond that point. Rather than working until you run out of energy, you work backward from a hard stop, which forces better prioritization of what you actually take on. The research Newport cites on deliberate practice suggests that even the most experienced knowledge workers max out at around 4 hours of genuine deep work per day. Beyond that, diminishing returns set in fast. The implication is clear: your goal is not to fill the day with focus, but to protect those 4 hours from the tidal pull of everything else. Deep work has aged well since its publication in 2016. If anything, the problem it diagnoses has gotten worse. The book that comes closest in spirit is Yoong's Indistractable, but where Al focuses on managing internal triggers and external temptations, Newport goes further upstream, arguing that the entire culture of the modern workplace is structured against depth. Al tells you how to resist the pull. Newport tells you the pull itself is the problem. For someone who's already convinced that distraction is costing them something, deep work gives that feeling a name, a cause, and a remedy. The book that fills the gap deep work leaves around execution systems is David Allen's Getting Things Done. Newport shows you how to value and protect deep time. Allen gives you the underlying organizational architecture, the trusted system, the weekly review, that frees your mind from the constant background noise of open loops. They are genuinely complementary and worth reading together. What the book gets profoundly right is the core insight that attention is the raw material of a good life. Not time, attention. You can have the same number of hours as anyone else and build nothing, if those hours are parceled out in slivers. And now, for the honest critique. The book is more prescriptive than it needs to be in places. Newport's own life, as a tenured academic who controls his schedule, works largely alone, and measures success by papers and books published, is a near-perfect environment for deep work. The prescriptions land cleanly in that context. For knowledge workers in messier situations, open-plan offices, client-facing roles, jobs that genuinely require rapid response, the gap between the ideal and the possible can feel discouraging. Newport acknowledges this briefly, but the acknowledgement sometimes gets lost in the confidence of the recommendations. The chapter on quitting social media is also the weakest. His argument is thoughtful, but he occasionally underestimates the legitimate professional value these tools provide for certain kinds of workers: a journalist, a designer, an entrepreneur building a brand. Their relationship with social media is more complex than the book allows. And there's a question the book never quite answers: what should you do with the deep work once you've done it? Newport is excellent on how to protect and produce depth. He's quieter on whether the direction of that depth is right. A person can work deeply on something that doesn't matter. The book assumes you already know what matters. But here's what to carry into sleep tonight. You live in an environment that has been engineered to fragment your attention. Not maliciously, just structurally. And the cost of that fragmentation isn't just lost productivity. It's a shallower experience of your own work, your own thinking, your own life. The answer isn't to rage against technology. It's to be deliberate. To decide what work is actually worth your best concentration. To protect the hours when you can go deep. And to practice, daily, patiently, the quiet art of staying with a hard thing until it opens. That's what Carl Jung did in his stone tower. And it's what every person who has ever made something genuinely excellent has done, in one form or another. Sleep well. And we'll see you at Whispering Pages for the next one.